And be back here. Okay, cool. All right, so we've just been, by way of essentially buying time so we can get started on this hermeneutics book, just going through the parables of Jesus and seeing what they teach us about the kingdom. Because remember, in the book of Matthew, Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven. And in Luke and Mark, it usually gets described as the kingdom of God. They're synonyms. But in Matthew, almost every time he gives a parable, he's describing something about the kingdom. Something about the kingdom. So we can learn more about the kingdom of heaven by looking at these parables and trying to discern what he's talking about, what's the point that he's trying to make, which is really interesting. And you get to practice little hermeneutical principles and stuff. We've also been just looking at what it says, looking for observations with what's in each little, I'll just call them a story or parable, and then taking the next step of, okay, what's the generalized principle? And then after you find the generalized principle, then finding application for whoever you might be teaching, or even for yourself, or just kind of depends. Yes, sir?
Pardon me, what is hermeneutical? Is this word history? Or?
Hermeneutics is the principle and processes of interpretation. So how to interpret a text. Mm-hmm. So normally in our everyday language, especially within our own context, we don't have to focus on the process of interpretation. If we read a news article, or if we read something that's written today, or if you get a letter from somebody, the things that would hinder your understanding of what that person was trying to communicate, there aren't as many hurdles to get over, because you're in the same kind of time frame. You're using similar turns of phrases that people would normally use during that cultural context. Like nowadays, it's all about memes, right? And you send memes to each other, and you get little chuckles and stuff. Like, imagine trying to being alive 1,000 years from now and looking back at memes and trying to understand why that was funny.
I don't know why they're funny now.
Some of them, right? It's just like, oh, this kid is making a fist, and he's just like, "Urgh." And then you just put whatever you want, where it's like someone should be angry, and this is their reaction. It's like, okay. But like, they make sense, and they're funny within this cultural context. Now that when you're trying to read the Bible, that's its own historical and cultural context that we're trying to understand. And because it's different, we'll have to do a little bit more work to understand why the writer put it in that way, or in that order, or use this word, or lots of different things to look at, which I find to be lots of fun. It's like a little puzzle that you can try and solve. It's cool. But that's hermeneutics, is trying to understand the things that might hinder our understanding of a given text, analyzing the text in light of those things that might hinder our understanding, and then come to a better understanding, because it might not be as immediate as if it was a text that we might be reading today. All right, so we also, a few weeks ago, we were looking at these parables through the lens of the already and not yet. And so, is the kingdom of God right now, or is it in the future? And the answer is
now and then.
yes. Like it's a little of both. But looking at it from that lens, that might change either our interpretation or our application, depending on what it's giving us, whether we think this is applying to a future reality or to right now. So kind of looking at these parables through that lens as well.
What did he say the kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven was? Like, it's here and present and in the future.
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
But what is it? It's the rule and reign of Jesus Christ. It's it's the people that submit themselves to his rule and reign. That's the kingdom.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Where's the scripture found? This is called greater is he that's within you than he that's in the world.
Oh, where?
1 John 4:4.
Oh,
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So let's get into the dragnet right here. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a net. that was cast into the sea and gathered of every kind, which, when it was full, they drew to shore and sat down and gathered the good into vessels, but cast the bad away. So shall it be at the end of the world. The angel shall come forth and sever the wicked from among the just, and shall cast them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. So right there seems pretty clear. Is this already or not yet?
Not yet.
So this is not yet, yeah, because it says at the end of the world, right? So shall it be at the end of the world. So we're not at the end of the world as of yet. But what's the overall point? First, what's happening in the story? So we have a net that's thrown out into the sea, and this would have been similar to what Peter and James and John would have been doing. They would have the Sea of Galilee, I guess, relatively is kind of small, and so you would go out, maybe not super far, but you'd throw your net off the side of the boat and try and just pull up whatever would be caught in the net. And so you throw your net out, wait a little bit, pull it back up, and whatever's in there, you go back to shore. And if your net was full, it's like it'd be pretty hard to pull it back into the boat. So you just bring the boat back to shore, pull it up on the beach, start throwing stuff, either into barrels for the good, and then throw the other stuff away. And so you're making a separation, you're making a judgment on what's good and what's bad, what needs to be kept and what needs to be thrown away. So there's this idea of kind of keeping and discarding. He interprets it for us in verse 49, so shall it be at the end of the world. So this is a judgment. And you sever the wicked from among the just and shall cast them into the furnace of fire. And there shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Fire, what does the fire mean right there? Hell, okay. But I guess what I want you to notice is we have to do some kind of interpretation there.
Like Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Like, yeah, so they're like the furnace of fire. Right. So let's say we wanted to interpret it as so there's like two ways to interpret this, right? You have the like final judgment of the condemned, like the fully condemned, right, where death and hell are cast into the lake of fire, right? Utter separation from the Lord. And then you have everyone else that believes in the Lord. They're going to be with the Lord, where heaven and earth have come back together and to forever be with the Lord. That's one way to look at this. Another way to look at this, which depends on how you're taking kingdom of heaven, right? Is this some kind of judgment of everyone within this judgment is a believer?
It says all
Okay.
kinds. Every kind, what is that kind?
So every kind of fish.
Well, if you're applying this for humans, what does that mean?
There you
That's
go.
what the gospel is.
Now we're getting into, okay, how are we, this is why Jesus' teaching is so rich, is because you have to think about it and pull it apart and look and go, okay. Now, is there anything within verses 47 to 50 that would tell me which way I should think about this?
Yes.
Okay, where is it?
He cast his net around the whole earth and gathers all of us, whether you accept him or not. But he came, he loves each and every one of us. He wants to give everybody a chance. He came, he served, he was meek, he was good. So he gave us all the chances in the world.
And he said,
But it says cast the good in one and the bad in another.
Right. So what Brother David is saying is the net covers the entire world, and when it gets pulled in, everyone in the world is being separated into either the good or the bad. Right.
"Wheat tears."
So wheat and tares. that's interesting, because if we go back to the wheat and tares, let's see, that was pretty far up. Grain of mustard seed. Here we go.
Verse 40.
Yeah. Yeah. So Matthew 13.
Lest we gather the terror.
Right. The enemy has done this. Lest we gather up the tares, we root up the wheat with them. Oh, no, the interpretation is down in verse. Okay. Yeah. It's down here. All right. So he that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. Right. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. Enemy that sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world. The reapers are the angels. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be at the end of this world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend.
So in this
So-
instance, what is the furnace of fire? Because this is being used twice.
Yes. So, and that's what I'm getting at. One of, it's like there's these two interpretations, right? And if we use this as our starting point, it would seem to imply everything is within the kingdom, right? And they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend. So even the things that offend, the evil ones, are still within the kingdom. And then they get separated out. Now, the interpretive part is the offense are them which do iniquity, right? Shall cast them into a furnace of fire. Should be wailing and gnashing of teeth. And now, I'm not trying to say like which one is right. I'm just saying that this is how people parse these things out. And if you're reading in a commentary, someone who's arguing that like, oh no, everyone's within the kingdom, and it's not the ultimate sorting, let's say, between the good and evil. I think it is, but if someone is arguing for this other side, this is where they're getting it from. And it's still within the text, but they're thinking about it in a little bit different way. Yes, sir.
The kingdom is those who submit to Christ, you said, right?
Yeah, the rule and reign
So how
of
is
Christ.
it that everybody's in the kingdom when they don't submit to Christ? And we believe in the rapture where the Christians are going to be taken out, and it says the angels are going to gather those that offend. It sounds like the angels taking
The offensive
the,
ones, yeah.
the unbelievers or the wicked ones out. It sounds like that's what it sounds like.
Right. Well, now you're kind of mashing two ideas together. I don't think this is describing a rapture necessarily
But
of the
I'm saying
wicked.
that the angels is taking.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
because he's using that metaphor to explain the gathering together. I think we're just supposed to get like there's a gathering together of the ones that offend, and then there's the gathering together of the ones that don't. Same with the net. It's like they all get pulled in, but then there's a separation. And they're put in two different piles. I think that's.
Sign of the tribulation period.
I don't know. It's a good question. So then if we're looking at it from the not yet, is that what that's describing? Could be. Yes, sir.
You use the term, this vocabulary, parse. How do you use that? What do you mean?
Parse. Like separate, or make distinctions. But someone who's interpreting it as everyone within the kingdom is are believers. Someone who's going with that as their starting point, they would point to this part of, right? They gather out of his kingdom all things. So, well, not all things, but they gather out of his kingdom. So like everything is under his rule and reign. And then they would, yeah. So let's see.
You know, this is not talking about the millennium?
Can we see the footnote from I?
Say again?
Can we see the footnote from I?
From I of every kind. So compare to verse 38. The field is the world, the good seed are the children of the kingdom, the tares are the children of the wicked. So very similar ideas meshing together here. And this is this is in chapter 22. So those servants went out into the highways and gathered together as many as they found, both bad and good. And the wedding was furnished with guests.
So in these parables,
5.
are the wicked, the bad, are they the unsaved, or are these potentially Christians, but they're saved, but they're not following Christ?
Right,
They're carnal Christians.
right, because there's the judgment for both, and that's what makes it. That's what makes both interpretations, I would say, viable or workable.
Right, because the fire is talking about judgment. and
Fire
we
is
are
fire
talking
is a
about
symbol of
but it's
judgment.
like the unsaved.
Yep.
But we need to keep in mind too, he's talking about they're going to be cast into the fiery furnace or the furnace of fire.
And there
blah,
should
blah,
be
blah, blah.
wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Even, yes, there are carnal Christians, but do we believe that if they're saved, they're saved?
Yes.
Because carnal Christians are still saved.
Right.
And they're not gonna be cast into the lake of fire.
Correct.
But this doesn't say like a fire, this could
Right.
just be judgment.
These are exactly the points where these are the points where they make their arguments and for what it means.
But the wailing and gnashing of teeth,
Ah.
that's,
So this, oh yes, oh, so only because the wailing and gnashing of teeth is also used in the parable of where is it? I can't remember which one. The wedding feast and the wedding feast, or maybe it's the 10 virgins. Anyways, the idea there is there's a wedding feast, and the closer you are to the bridegroom and the bride, the closer you are to the light, and the further you are away, it's darker and darker because the wedding feast is in the evening, and I can't remember if it's the 10 virgins or the wedding feast, but the idea there is they can't get in because they were too. I think it's the 10 virgins. So they weren't prepared. They didn't have their oil in their lamps. They didn't trim their wicks. So they had to go buy oil, and when they came back, the door was already shut, and they couldn't get in, and they were in darkness. And I believe this phrase is used there, wailing and gnashing of teeth. And in that parable, he's talking to his disciples, and he's talking about being prepared.
It's 22:13.
22:13, yeah. And so in that one, let's see, 22:13.
And God uses his angels, like Lonnie was saying, he uses them from
Ah,
the beginning
yeah.
of time to, fight battles, separate, help the good.
All right. So this is the wedding feast where the person doesn't have the proper garment. Bind him, throw him out. No, I was thinking of the 10 virgins, which is 25. Took no oil in their vessels, slumbered and slept. I think it has the same phrase at the end. They came. Lord, Lord, open to us. Verily I say unto you, watch therefore, you neither know the day or the hour. No, I was incorrect.
No, verse 25, 30.
25. For the kingdom of heaven.
Wrong spot. I'm in the wrong spot. Never mind.
You had it at the beginning where it showed that they were cast in darkness and wailing and gnashing of teeth.
So there is multiple references of weeping and gnashing of teeth through Matthew 12, Matthew 13:42. Children of the kingdom should be cast into outer darkness.
That's what we were just looking at,
Children
13.
of the kingdom.
Yep.
So that's not necessarily referencing
13.
they're not saved, they are children of the kingdom, but they're still weeping and gnashing in outer darkness.
Or they're not saved.
All right. Yes, sir.
Is this question we were at, what was it now? Matthew 25:2?
25:2 would be the parable of the 10 virgins. That one. Let me go back to, not this one.
So I imagine at the rapture, everyone left behind is going to be wailing and gnashing their teeth because they had free will and chose not
There
to
shall
believe.
be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Children of the kingdom shall be cast into outer darkness. There shall be, there it is, 8. So this is,
In heaven will bury.
here we go. So this is, oh, this is when the centurion asks Jesus to heal his servant. And Jesus, when he heard it, he marveled. So the faith of the centurion, he goes, hey, you don't have to come to my house to heal my servant. Just say the word and it'll happen. And Jesus, it says that he marveled. That's like, this blew Jesus' mind. Like, this was the amount of faith that this centurion had. He goes, you just say the word and it happens. I'm a man under authority. I understand how this works. I give a command, it happens. You know, if I say go, they go. If I say come, they come. He goes, that's all you have to do for my servant. Jesus heard it and marveled and said unto them that followed, verily I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. And I say unto you, that many shall come from the east and west, and shall sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast out into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And Jesus said unto the centurion, go thy way. As thou hast believed, so be it done unto thee. So that would be another, in this case, the children of the kingdom, I think, is a bit more narrow than anyone within the kingdom, because he's talking about, he's talking about those that would sit with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
In the
And,
kingdom of heaven.
right, and he hasn't seen great faith, not in Israel. So I think that narrows the interpretation to those that he came to. He's coming to seek and to save that which is lost, which are the people of Israel.
Gentiles?
Well, there will be, right? I haven't found so great a faith, not in Israel. And I say unto you that many shall come from east and west, so that would be the Gentiles, inclusion, right? And the Gentiles are the ones that are going to sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. Now, that would be crazy to a Jewish person in the first century. They're like, no, that's not how it works. I'm of Abraham, like his lineage, therefore I'm in the kingdom. And Jesus is going, the children of the kingdom shall be cast out. It's more than just being of the bloodline of Abraham. It's more than, it has to do with your faith, which ties in with this great faith. And Paul makes this argument in at the beginning of the book of Romans in chapter 4. He's talking about it's not about keeping the law that makes you righteous. It's your faith. And he goes, how do I know that? Well, before there was ever a law, Abraham was justified. Abraham was saved. What? By faith. He believed the promise of God that he would be made a nation, essentially, in his old age. A miracle would happen. There was a son of promise, which was Isaac, right? And because he believed that his descendants would be as the sand of the sea or as the stars of the heavens, because he believed God would do that, it was counted to him as righteousness. And so that's what he was justified. And it had nothing to do with keeping the law. It had everything to do with his faith. And so how are people saved? It's by where they place their faith. If Israel, so getting back to this, if Israel is not, if they're trusting in their lineage, if they're trusting in, oh, I'm from Abraham, I'm a child of Abraham, that means I'm good to go. It doesn't matter what I do. It's like, that's, Jesus is saying, no, that's not the children of the kingdom shall be cast out because they didn't have the faith that the centurion showed. Yes, sir.
Abraham became the first Jew. There was no Jew.
There were, exactly, yeah. He was the first one. But it was before Moses, right? So it's before the law was given. And at least in the book of Romans, if Jews are, Paul is describing Jews as trusting in keeping the law for them to be saved. And Paul is saying, no, that's not how anyone was ever saved, by keeping the law.
You
That's
can also put it to today's things, like when you witness to someone and say, well, I grew up in a Christian home. I've been going to church,
it's like that sounds like you're trusting in your your Christian home and you're trusting in going to church and not trusting in Christ. Like,
Your lineage again. You-
yeah, right, yeah. And again, Paul, in just a second. And then Paul, again, in Philippians, when he gives his pedigree, he's like, look, if anybody has any reason to brag, I have the most reason to brag, right? And he just like, he gives all of the reasons. It's like, I am, as a Pharisee touching the law, I'm like blameless. I'm a Jew, like a Jew of the Jews, like I'm of the tribe of Benjamin. I'm like, he just lists it out. All the reasons why
Where, please?
I'm better than anybody, really.
Where is it?
That's in Philippians chapter 3.
Yeah, what verse?
I think it's, I'm not sure which verse. But he gives that, it's down a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Starting in verse 4. Though I might have confidence in the flesh, if any other man think that he hath whereof he might trust in the flesh, I the more. Right? Circumcised the 8th day, of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of the Hebrews, touching the law, a Pharisee, concerning zeal, persecuting the church, touching the righteousness which is of the law, blameless. All of those things are nothing, though. They're all considered loss or trash or caprion. Ooh, yeah. In order to have Christ. Yes, sir.
The centurion, he was a Gentile, as
Yes.
Abraham, so it's a good example.
Yeah, definitely. But the reason I say all of that is to say, I think this phrase in this context is referring to Jews only, not the world at large, which is what we were referring to back in 13. But it does give us a similar picture of there's going to be a separation. There's going to be a distinction made. And what's that distinction going to be? All right, so go back down to... going back to your point, I think it was your point, Brother Dave. You were saying that, so it also depends on how we interpret this furnace of fire. If we interpret it as the lake of fire, then it's like, okay, this is definitely at the end, right? And there's the ultimate separation, and that's the lake of fire, and okay. That all fits together. There should be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Of course there would be, because it's the ultimate judgment. And if you're on that wrong side, like, yeah, wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Separation with God alone, so we can
Yeah,
go that way.
yeah, definitely. And that is the ultimate separation, right? If someone chooses to reject Christ, because God loves human beings, he respects them, and he goes, I will not force my love on you. Like, yeah, I mean, can you imagine someone who's like, I hate God, I hate God, I hate God, and then God goes, yeah, but I'm so loving that I'm going to force you to be with me for all eternity. It's like, that's not, like, or I guess imagine, that almost sounds like never mind, I don't want to use that metaphor. That would be bad. So what he does is he goes, okay, if that's what you want, you can have it your way. But since everything good comes from God, and I don't think people realize this, when they reject God, they reject everything that's good. All of it. And so if they're going to be separated from all that is good, they're going to be isolated on their own. And it's just like, is that what you really want? Like, no, I want to do all the things that I like to do, just more and forever. It's like, but all of the good things that you enjoy, those things come from God. And if you're separated from that, like, what do you think your existence is going to be like forever? Like, think about that. Yes, sir.
Wasn't there a challenge initially when these creatures, well, Adam and Eve, sort of took on what is it, like first word, they ate from a fruit that
Yeah.
knowledge good and evil, But if they would have gotten the other one,
Oh, the
or
tree
if
of
they
life,
would have gotten it, they would have lived forever, supposedly. I'm sorry. but
Yeah, no.
I'm getting a little bit mixed up, maybe.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So if someone, yeah, I would, since this is at the end of the world, right? And there's a separation and there's a casting into a furnace of fire, then I take this as like the ultimate separation, right? The lake of fire, Revelation 20, Revelation 20. But if someone interprets it as the other way, that it's describing a judgment on believers, like the Bema seat, if they take it that way, the fire imagery is also used in that judgment. And so that's how they can get there. I don't think that's what it's talking about, but I want you to see that how someone could think that way and how they could like try and step by step get to that position, try and understand that, and then be like, well, I think that position is wrong because of these other reasons. Yeah.
He used fire to separate us and not allow us back into the garden. He uses fire in a lot of different contexts, but similar.
Yeah, and since this is talking about, again, the end of the world, it's like, oh, okay. There's the and judgment. Fire is a very common symbol for judgment. And so I can see someone going, oh, we could be used the symbol of fire to describe the great white throne judgment, right? That's the ultimate separation. Or at the Bema seat where there's, your works are judged by fire and you are saved as if by fire. And that's in, yeah. And then that's 1 Corinthians chapter 3 in that judgment.
But fire is also used in the Bible as a way to temper and temper us.
That's right. So that's,
There are a lot
yeah.
of Purities that make us more pure and Christ-like.
Right. And so that gets into, yeah. So then I think if you use that idea in this instance, you would be putting something into it that's not coming out of it necessarily.
Yeah, because it's the end of the world.
Because it's,
There are
right,
always
exactly.
lots of time to do that.
But notice what I did was I pointed to something within the text to justify what I'm saying about how I'm interpreting it. And that's like, those are the things that we're going to get into like starting next week. Yes, sir.
I think the children of the kingdom might be just unbelievers. Because there are Jews that are believers in Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just be children of the kingdom, just can't be Jews.
Well, in Matthew 8, I think it was. I don't think here in Matthew 13. I don't think that's what it's describing. But back when Jesus was talking about the faith of the centurion, I think that's when he used it within that context. He was talking about the Jews. But here, because he was talking about the faith of the centurion, how there's going to be people coming from east and west, that's Gentile inclusion into the kingdom. And then he goes, but the children of the kingdom will be cast out. It's like, those are the Jews that don't have faith like the centurion had. Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. All right. This is the last one. Have you understood these things? And they say, yes. And then said unto them, therefore every scribe which is instructed unto the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is a householder, which bringeth forth out of his treasure things new and old. And I think what's cool there is, I think this is a piggyback off of the principle of the more that you understand, the more understanding you will have, right? And then you'll be able to make distinctions, and you'll be able to interpret, and you'll be able to put things together. But that's my interpretation of that. Yes, sir.
You just mentioned before, but I did not get the verse, and you did not mention the verse. Is 1 Corinthians 3?
1 Corinthians chapter 3. Yep. That's
What verse, please?
it's going to be like right, it's not right at the beginning of the chapter, but it's, let's see. It's right after he says, yeah, you are carnal, there are divisions among you. I planted, Apollos watered, God gave the increase. So neither is he that planted anything, neither he that watereth, but God giveth the increase. Now he that planteth, he that watereth are one, and every man shall receive his own reward, according to his own labor. For we are laborers together with God. Ye are God's husbandry. Ye are God's building. According to the grace of God, which is given unto me, as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another buildeth thereon. But let every man take heed how he buildeth, there it is, how he buildeth thereon. For other foundation no man lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. If any man build upon his foundation gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, and stubble, every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it. This is it right here. Because it shall be revealed by fire. Verse 13. Yep. And the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. If any man's work abide, which he hath built thereupon, he shall receive a reward. Any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss. But he himself shall be saved, yet so as by fire. So verses, I would say 13 through 15 is kind of the section there. All right, let's